Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with Indianapolis-based entrepreneur, creative, cancer survivor, and DJ Iman Tucker. His story began by being abandoned by his parents, overcoming a rural environment as a minority that has evolved into building a seven-figure tech company, a faith-based retail company, and now travels the country as a performing DJ. His life can be summed up by learning through hardship. We get into all of this and so much more. Enjoy this interview.
Hello, this is Iman Tucker.
Yeah, hi, Iman. It's Joe Dimino.
Hey, how you doing today?
I'm good, man. Before we get into your life, very interesting life that you've led, I want to know, especially now that we're looking at the calendar being March, I'm sure there's levels of us that are thinking about 3 years ago when everything halted, and I'm curious how you survived COVID and how it's changed the way that you live your life and conduct business now.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it would be crazy for me to feel like I was the only person whose life changed during COVID, because I know that we all had to adapt. But with my situation, it was unique because for the first time in really my professional career, I felt like I was turning that corner. And part of that had to do with being in the entertainment industry and even being in the technology industry. There's a lot of front-facing work that we do in terms of being right in front of our people. And like many people, that shut off. And next thing I knew, I was my income had probably gotten cut about 50% from the performing that I was doing. All the biggest contracts that I had at the time, of course, those were halted as well. And it was kind of like one of those we'll get back to it things. But immediately I kind of had to figure out how to rethink and redo my entire business model from that point.
So I guess that's the question now. Have things picked up? Have you seen an uptick in business now that the world's opening up and people are craving live entertainment?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But it certainly came. It wasn't easy, I'll say that, because it almost felt like after the pandemic happened, we had fallen back into this like invisible space of being unrecognized, unheard of, and really unsought after. And so I think the biggest challenge for me was trying to take the creativity out of it, because I already knew that we had something to offer there, but try to think more along the lines of an entrepreneur or business owner of, okay, how can we actually market ourselves and push it out the channels where people start to inquire and wonder or even consider having us back?
So let's get a handle exactly on what you do for a living. Now, you're based out of Indianapolis?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, cool, man. So if you were to be put in front of a bunch of kids at a career day, a bunch of third graders, and one of the kids looks up at you and asks you, what do you do for a living? How do you answer them?
Well, the first thing that came to mind is probably the first thing I would say if somebody asked me that. I would say I build systems. And a kid would probably be like, well, what does that mean? And I would define it as I take the things I love, specifically in the space of creativity, music, innovation, and build a system around it that allows a sustainable business to be built. And the biggest one, the one that probably people see the most, is our DJ company and our DJ business, and myself as a DJ or turntablist. And honestly, that's one of the ones I had the most fun with. But we're a little bit more multifaceted than that, but that's probably the one that stands out the most to a lot of people.
Obviously, you're highly driven, and there's a lot that you give of yourself for your business. And I'm curious, going back to your childhood, where did these seeds begin for you? How did you get these motivations and seeds to grow into who you are today?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've never really even been, and I wish I could take the credit for it, and I wish I could give somebody specifically the credit for it, but just the way I was made, the way God made me, how I was born, I don't know. I just have never really been satisfied with leisure time. So whether it's watching a movie or just listening to music or playing video games, I would do it, because that's what kids do. But in the back of my mind, I always wondered, how could I alter this or change this or make it better or make it more custom fit to even my own likings. And one of my favorite examples I ever use is, I don't know if you've ever heard of the concept of modding a video game, but I was the kid that would get it on PC just so I could do what they call modding it and add custom elements into the game that didn't exist when the developers created it. And so it was just one of those things where as I got older, I recognized that there are certain type of skills I want to have and there's things I want to know. And the more skills I have in the creative industry, the more rooms I get to or get to be in that people probably would have never considered me otherwise. And when I recognized that with a decent plan and good mentorship, almost anything in this tangible earth is possible to consider or learn or monetize, that's when it really started to get serious for me.
So what was the first gig that you had, the first real big gig that you had that you thought, this is it, this is my life, this is what I want to do?
Well, so I think I had two answers there. The first thing I heard you say was, what was your first gig? And then the second thing I heard you say was, what was my first big gig? Well, I actually, sometimes I can't not pay homage to my very first gig because I actually, one of my roommates, even now to this day, it was at his house. It was at a college party. You know, I wasn't the guy that was drinking. I wasn't smoking. I was the dude standing on the wall, making sure all my people I came with got home safe, also known as the designated driver. But then one day I was actually charged with playing the music at the party, and that worked great for me because, like I said, I'm not really a guy that's really into leisure, and so utility was important. So I started playing it, and then just to see that the music selection can really change the energy and even the integrity of the party, that actually meant a lot to me. And that was the first time I really thought, like, wow, this is what being a DJ is about. And so then follow up, what is the first big gig that I ever had? The first big gig I ever had, actually, this is almost crazy for me to think about. I was performing in our city downtown at what we call our 500 Festival. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Indy 500, but it's a pretty big month where Indy cars, racing, all that stuff goes on, and the city really puts a lot of events behind it and makes it a really larger-than-life deal. Well, I go downtown, and I hear, hey, I'm going to be DJing for one of these events. It's a festival. Have fun. Do a good job. Next thing I know, I get there, and the production is larger than life. 300,000 people stretched among, I don't even know how many miles, but quite a few miles, and I'm in charge of the sound for that event. I'll tell you right now, there was nothing in my soul that felt qualified to do that, but to know that based on reputation and image alone, somebody put me in that seat, that's when I really recognized, wow, I got to start taking this serious. And this was May 2019.
Yeah, the Indy 500, that's the Super Bowl right there, so I can only imagine.
That's definitely our Super Bowl here.
Yeah, and, you know, when I think about that, because Kansas City's on the cusp of having the World Cup, and I've seen for 3 years actually, how this town interacts with the Super Bowl. Yes, when you get to that high caliber and you can be a part of that on the fringe, so to speak, and pull people in, that's a big deal. So, you know, in your life of being who you are and being an entertainer, who's been kind of a role model or a hero for you?
Oh, man, that list is just, it's so long, so extensive because I've been blessed with some of the best mentors in my life, friends, colleagues, people before me, even people after me, even my intern now. I would say the people that stand out to me the most, there's two specifically. And one of them was kind of like I call my DJ business mentor. His name was Jeremy Gary's, and he was by no means the interactive turntablist. He wasn't the guy mixing music, scratching, doing all that crazy stuff. He was just a guy that really understood the business aspect of creating a sustainable DJ company. And he took me under his wing, actually, when I was still in college, and he just loved me so closely and taught me so much about how to handle myself as a professional, down to what I wore, down to how I projected my voice and my vocals on a microphone, just everything. And then my second mentor, he is actually a DJ legend here in the city. He goes by Metronome, DJ Metronome, and he has a school in Indianapolis called Decademics. Well, I had heard him playing out at a restaurant one night, and this guy was doing things I'd never seen a DJ do before. And I was so intrigued on it, and I knew that I wanted to get to that point. I just didn't know how. And so once I actually enrolled in his school, we got pretty close over my time being there, and he started giving me gigs on behalf of him and his business, and we just grew even closer than that. And so those two people allowed me to actually understand what it takes to be good And then since through then, we just continue to stack in new networks and new mentors now to get to the next level that we're trying to go.
So if you could meet anybody alive on the planet and spend some time with them, who would it be? Who would you love to meet and talk to?
That is a really good question. And maybe I don't know the actual face or name of the person, but I can tell you what their characteristics are. I would say it's a person that's a great father, a person that's a great husband, a person that has lived in the space of entertainment but has built businesses, a person that's a great orator. They can speak really well and they can captivate a crowd. Perhaps they even can write well. Just somebody that's a really well-rounded, wholesome person that has the people in his life, they are his top priority, his top interest. And like I said, I can't put a face to that name right now because I think it really requires knowing somebody on a personal level to know who that person is. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it certainly does. It certainly does. So, in your life, every day we get up, the alarm clock goes off, we're motivated to do things. What is it that gets you up out of bed? What is it that gets you moving and wanting to accomplish what you want to do in a day?
Gosh, that's a really good question too, man. You're asking all the deep, thought-provoking questions today.
Yeah.
I actually love that question because I think I know a lot of young people that really struggle with trying to identify what gets them out of bed, and they actually have a hard time. It's almost like a regrettingly or begrudgingly, like a task to really do that. And I would say for me, I had to take myself out of my own goals and recognize that there's somebody before me that is requiring me to figure out how to do this at a high level so that they can unlock their level. And I think about that person all the time. And one of those people in my life actually is my intern. He's still in high school. He's a junior in high school. And he's so hungry to learn, and he's such a people person. He's so charismatic, but I don't think he really understands and has a vision for his life after high school. And so whenever I think about him, it's no question. I got to get out of bed and get back to it and get to work. And, of course, there's some, I guess, self-reward or self-benefits that come out of the fun stuff that I do, but I just really don't see that as a sustainable way to live, always thinking about myself. I think there has to be something bigger than you that's inspiring you on the back end.
So when you get to the end of that said day, how do you quantify a good day? How do you look back and say that day worked for me?
Oh, that's another good question. And earlier on in my career, that was very tough because it was always objective-based. I was like, oh, did I get this task done? Or, oh, did I finish this thing? And if I didn't get my complete checklist done, I felt like a loser. I felt like a failure. And what I noticed is over the days and over the time, every day I would never get everything done. So it seemed like I was stacking up all these days in a row of not being successful or not being productive or not being as productive as I wanted to be. But then really I had to start giving myself grace and recognize that the mode in which I'm working and the way in which I'm operating is not normal. Somebody that's getting up every single day, learning something new, making sure they're prioritizing their health, they're working out, they're following up with all the people in their life that they want to communicate and talk to, and still actually getting work done regardless of how much or how little it is, that's actually very successful. And I'm starting to learn that life isn't so much for me about achievement more than it is about discovery. And if I can look back on a day and say, hey, you know what, I really discovered something about the world or something about myself, and it's allowing me to be a better person the next day, as cheesy or cliche as that sounds, that's how I've been beginning to quantify what is or how many good days I've had. Because, you never know when all this can be taken away from you. And if you just constantly worry about, oh, I got to achieve to be happy, you're going to struggle. And so now it's just more along the lines of, can I happily achieve each day? And then we'll say, hey, that was a good day.
Let's say you have a dream tonight, you run into the younger version of yourself, and you could give that version of you a piece of advice based on the life you've led, the choices you've made, the wisdom you've gained. What would you tell your young version?
Stop doubting yourself. Stop being so scared. Stop investing in everything but yourself. Lead with boldness. Lead with courage. Don't get caught up in silly vices. Don't get caught up in silly drama, and be the best you and treat people really well and be interested. Don't be interesting. Like, don't try to be the interesting person in the room. Genuinely be interested in the people that's around you, and I guarantee you that you're going to be just fine, young Iman. That's exactly what I would tell him, and just hopefully he isn't too stubborn or arrogant to not listen to old Iman, right?
Absolutely. So, obviously, in your line of work, music's a big deal. What was an album or an artist for you that's always been inspiring that you return to?
Oh, man, I always got to think about an Indiana native, which a lot of people don't recognize him as an Indiana native. But one of the greatest artists of all time. If I had to tell you who you think it is, who would you guess?
Oh, man. I sometimes when I think about Indianapolis, I can't get around Letterman, and I need to really throw my brain in there. I'm drawing a blank, man.
So, yeah, let's expand it a little bit further out of Indianapolis, and I'll just say Indiana in general, and it's Gary, Indiana. It's Michael Jackson.
Wow, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
And that's typically the response I get. People are like, oh, yeah, I've heard of that before, actually. I just kind of forgot. Yeah. But, you just think about how creative and how his body of work lasted not just over a year, over 2 years, but this was decades of very impactful music that now, even 40 years later, it's still relevant. It still makes people move, and it still makes people feel some type of way, just, in a good, positive, fun, uplifting, and encouraging way. I don't know. I can't get beside the musicality in him and the fact that he was a complete entertainer. We're talking about the person. When's the last time an artist would walk into the room and people would literally pass out at the thought of how big of a personality this person was? That's just always been really inspiring to me, and it always makes me want to level up all the little individual elements of my entertainment, because, like I said, it's not just the music. It's how you show up, how you dress, how you take care of yourself, all those little things that really allow you to be this icon or this figure that's larger than life. And it's not that it's about being an icon, but it's about giving your audience the best experience from top to bottom.
It's interesting. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were just talking about star power. And they were like, we won't have another Michael Jackson or a Beatles in our lifetime. Like that's not going to happen just because the way that we consume media, social media, things like that. So it's interesting because he was probably the last, like Elvis, so to speak, on the planet. I got to tell you, though, from a jazz perspective, it took me a minute to let the fog lift. One of the most instrumental and biggest names in jazz came from Indianapolis, and that was Wes Montgomery.
Yeah.
And, he's referenced all the time, and he was phenomenal. So, the one thing about you and about any of us is that we have all these pockets of people that we know that have a perception of us. Family, friends, clients, colleagues, everyone has this in this certain life, but ultimately you live your life. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Oh, gosh, that's a good one, too. What I love the most about your questions right now is it's requiring me to think, but it's requiring me to think on my toes, because nobody loves to listen to a podcast or an interview where there's like a lot of gaps. But
that's why we have editing.
That's right. I say all that to say, like, for me, who I am and what my perception is of myself is I think that I'm a thinker and a considerer. And I specifically say considerer, not considerate. And that's not to say I don't think I am considerate. I might be, but I just love to internalize things and really think about things. And I think when I think about our product-based businesses or anything that we've ever done, they've always been born out of me looking at something that exists, thinking about it, and then trying to reverse engineer it. And many people in my life they give me the perception, or they call me like an overthinker. And really, I don't think I'm an overthinker. I just think a lot of people don't think enough, and they're underthinkers. And so if I had to think of somebody like myself and give myself a perception, I would say thoughtful. Now, whether that's positive or a negative thing, I don't know, but it's definitely been the reason why a lot of the things have happened the way they have in my life so far.
So of all of the things that you've done and accomplished in your life, what are you the proudest of?
I guess for those that know my story or those that have heard of my story, there's been a lot of trial and there's been a lot of things in which I've had to overcome. And I don't say that to aggrandize myself. I just say that as a truth and a reality for what it's like. And for me, the thing I'm most proud of is the fact that I haven't given up yet, and I haven't developed this callous or this negative perception on life. I still wake up very encouraged. I still wake up very peaceful, and I still wake up ready to do something great and something big. And I know for a lot of people that have faced similar circumstances to me, that's just not the reality. And fortunately and thankfully enough, I was not burdened with that to look at it in a negative light, and I'm just so thankful for that today. Like, to be my age and just still be happy to follow my dreams and love on people, encourage people, it just means everything to me.
So if anyone out there wants to learn more about you, find out anything pertaining to your world, hire you, where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, so our companies are all called Believe Brand. So if you just Google Believe Brand, you'll probably find one of our companies, and then from there you could probably find your way to other stuff. But yeah, just a simple search, Iman, I-M-A-N, Tucker. Typically we put an underscore in our name, so it's Iman_Tucker. But we try to keep everything simple, and we're actually on a push in the second half of 2023 to do more content, have more videos out there, have more educational stuff, more products and stuff. So what you see now hopefully is maximized by this point next year.
Wonderful, man. This has been illuminating, very refreshing. Thank you for opening up. You did very well in the therapy session. So I think we survived it. So I appreciate you taking time out.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for rescheduling, and thank you for making it work as well. I appreciate your questions. Very thoughtful.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.